everyone, welcome to this week's video where I'll be addressing some of the lies and disinformation going around about Australia's bushfires. We begin with the hysteria surrounding the size and locations of the fires, which has been greatly exaggerated and in some cases completely falsified. Fake maps have been circulating international news cycles and various internet platforms, making the crisis appear far worse and widespread than it actually is. My issue with this is that it's being done for clicks and ratings and likes. They don't really care. And while these current fires are exceptionally bad, they are still normal. Australia is the driest inhabited continent in the world. 70% of it is either arid or semi-arid land. The plants and animals living here today have spent millions of years evolving and adapting to conditions that other species find completely intolerable. They're used to heat and they're used to fire. In fact, many species need fire in order to continue their life cycle. Gum trees, for example, are one of those species. This leads us into my second issue, the claims that habitat and bushland have been permanently lost. Leftists, eco-activists and all-round hysterics are claiming that the forests and trees are completely incinerated. News outlets, celebrities and prominent YouTubers are spreading false information about the state of the land, and no one is explaining what actually happens next. Probably because despite being proud Australians and nature lovers, they don't actually know anything about our native flora and fauna. YouTuber Shanks, who I've mentioned briefly in a previous video, has been using his channel to cover the fires and raise money for various relief efforts. He's raised a lot of money, and that's awesome. I thank him sincerely for his fundraising work.
But I've been able to raise a lot of money for those on the front line and wildlife who have had their entire food supply burnt out. Donate to the ARC, they are doing food drops. And you know how I was able to accomplish that? By standing behind this mic. I think I'm a little more useful here than trying to hold up a massive fire hose with my weak little kid arms.
But I and others don't appreciate his contribution to the spreading of disinformation. YouTuber Orsum, who I have also previously featured, has challenged Jordan on some of his statements. And Jordan responded with a video that, disappointingly, just came across as...
Why are you so stupid?
He didn't debunk Gary at all, he just spread more disinformation.
Potentially millions of hectares of native habitat being permanently lost.
Permanently lost, you say? Oh, so the forests don't even grow back now. Seriously, dude, you're talking utter shit.
Why are the dumbest people always the most confident? As if a tree is turned to ash, it doesn't grow back.
If you go through and look at any aftermath footage, you'll see that all of the trees are still standing. Some even still have greenery on them. I provided some footage that I could find. But as I detailed in my Are Koalas Going Extinct video a few weeks ago, link in description box, both koalas and eucalyptus trees have adapted to bushfires in this country.
And behind me is Masons Falls viewing platform. This site's the highest visited site within the park, has over 100,000 visitors a year, and most people would walk to Masons Falls to view the waterfall. As you can see, this area has been quite high fire intensity. We know it's high intensity by the crowns have been totally taken out of the tops of these trees, so there's no leaf on the crown at all. If you look on the ground, there's very little left on the ground. There's a few small logs and stuff like that. That was the ranger's office that burnt down, so that housed the 7 staff, but there was also 4 staff that lived up on the mountain who lost their houses. Yeah, look, it's been a pretty tough time because we all had friends and acquaintances up here that died in the fire. And then people losing their own properties and so forth. And look, for some of it, they won't come back. They'll choose to live somewhere else. There's obviously quite a bit of fear out there about this event happening again and the fear about the bush. And so I think our challenge is to engage the community in a way that they can appreciate and live within this. Within 3 or 4 days of the fire, there was these massive fungi that came up out of the ground. You know, the whole place was still black and you had these big white fungi, and you could see that the wallabies and the wombats were feeding on that fungi. It was like, here's nature's way of hanging you guys on until something shoots back. Fire's not all bad. There's a lot of plants are dependent on fire. Grass trees are quite fire dependent to regenerate, so in 100 years they could flower a couple of times. That's going to depend on the amount of times you have fire through here. But if we come back here in 6 months' time, what we'll see is every plant will have a flower stalk which will be taller than the actual plant itself, and it'll just have masses, thousands and thousands of flowers on it, which attracts so many insects and animals and so forth to it. It'll just be a burst of life for 6 months, you know, and that's the role of fire. These plants wouldn't have regenerated without fire. What happens with these trees is that they have epicormic growth, and this is what we're seeing here is the epicormic growth. So it's buds below the bark. The bark protects the buds from the fire, and then this is how the tree gets its leaf coverage back on the tree, is by these buds that germinate from underneath the bark up along the trunk right up to the top of the crown. Mountain ash forest can't regenerate from epicormic growth. It holds all its seed in the crown, and there's just a mass of seeds falling out of those trees. Just be literally tons of seed. You walk back in there now and there's just thousands and thousands of seedlings across the ground.
As you can see, there's been a lot of regeneration of the bush. Last time we were here 15 months ago, it was just bare. The first sign of life was the moss growing on the hills, to the bracken coming back, and now being here, we've got, metre to a metre and a tall eucalypts.
There could be species that are going to come back that we haven't seen for a long time. And one of those examples is a plant called the swamp bush pea. It only covers about 2 hectares in the park, and it only occurs in 4 sites across Victoria. It needed a fire to regenerate it. We've had that fire. You go down there now and there's absolutely thousands of these plants.
If the trees are still standing, they will grow back. This is how nature works. What gum trees and koalas have not adapted to, however, is land clearing. If the trees in New South Wales and Queensland hadn't been bulldozed so much for lumber and agriculture, the koalas affected by the fires would have somewhere to go now. And on the subject of wildlife, what's most infuriating about all the bullshit that's going around right now are the catastrophic but misleading numbers circulating around about the numbers and types of animals killed in the fires.
No real number yet, but I know, we're getting a lot of rescues in, but again, to every animal that we find alive out there, we're seeing 100 to 100 dead.
Lies make baby Jesus cry.
People are claiming that 1 billion animals have perished. This is manipulating people, especially those overseas, into thinking that 1 billion koalas, possums and wombats died, when the truth is that most of the animals were livestock, cows and sheep, and most of them were euthanized post-fire.
That's the most distressing thing, I think, for most farmers, is the loss of livestock. We had just a small group of 140 sheep. We lost half of them. We had to shoot a few ourselves. The veterinary services euthanized another 30. They were very kind and got us to stay up the house, and we counted the gunshots as they finished them off. Our neighbour had 50 odd cows. He's got 3 left.
The rest killed were kangaroos, which are pests in most places, not to mention a good meal. The remaining deaths were koalas, birds, insects and reptiles. The rest survived. Most animals are smart enough to move on ahead of time or find shelter. Those too old, too sick, or too stoned would have been the ones to have died in the fires.
One remarkable species is lyrebirds. I mean, they can't fly very far, but they seem to be pretty smart, and I've obviously been able to find locations where in logs or down near the creek or something like that. But yeah, we had reports of one property where The person had 12 lyrebirds come in with singed tails and singed wings.
They're an amazing creature. I've heard different stories of them surviving the bushfires in dams with people, in creek beds, and I think they would be even intelligent enough to go down a wombat hole and snuggle in with a wombat. So, yeah, there's lots of stories, and yeah, it's just great to see them coming back in numbers.
But the fact is, the land will recover. The birds have already come back, and certain areas are already experiencing regrowth. The wildlife populations will also recover, if we tell the truth about what's really to blame for their demise. This leads us into my third and final issue, the shuffling of blame and the disinformation surrounding the causes of the fires and the reasons for their intensity and size. I'll let Daisy take this one.
Is it the fault of the Australian Greens Party for refusing to support hazard reduction and backburning? Or are the fires the result of catastrophic climate change and the failure of Scott Morrison's Liberal government to do enough to reduce emissions? Well, as to who is correct, the answer is nobody.
The real cause is a combination of extreme conditions, arson, lightning, and misdirection. As many people have already mentioned, we're in the midst of a natural phenomenon that has intensified the current drought. We're also in the midst of an arson onslaught, as almost 85% of Australia's fires are man-made, both deliberate and accidental. But the media, the celebrities and the activists want us to believe it's all because of climate change.
Russell Crowe could not be here with us tonight because he is at home in Australia protecting his family from the devastating bushfires. He sent along this message in case he won. Make no mistake, the tragedy unfolding in Australia is climate change based. We need to act based on science, move our global workforce to renewable energy, and respect our planet for the unique and amazing place it is. That way, we all have a future. Thank you.
While that may also be a factor, it's not the sole cause for the fires or for their size and intensity. And what I want to add to this is, while I sympathise with those who have lost loved ones, or their homes, or their livestock, I still have to ask, when does personal responsibility come into this? Most of the deaths were people who either chose not to evacuate or left it too late.
I stayed in Ford, yeah, but I'd say to anybody, don't stay, just go. No, don't stay, just go. Just get out and go. Just, all you do is put your life at risk. There's no need to, just go, just get out and go.
As it stands now, a task force has been set up and the army sent in. Firefighters are coming in from overseas to help our local heroes, and while a lot of this should have been done earlier, at least it's being done now. Better late than never. I will finish by saying that nature is incredible. She knows what she's doing. Let her get on with it. Thanks for watching.
news, everyone.
As I was editing this video, we got news that there was going to be rain coming, and that's really great. Let's listen.
New South Wales and Victoria are in for a summer soaking, with much needed rain forecast to fall in the fire-ravaged areas. Today, Sydney reporter Gabrielle Boyle has the latest. Gabby, this is of course welcome news. Just how much rain are we expecting?
Yeah, good morning, Tracy. Well, this may be the last of the blue skies we see here in Sydney for some time. We're expecting 100 millimetres of rain to fall across parts of New South Wales over the next few days. And it's not much different in Victoria. There we could even see some storms hit tomorrow afternoon.
Yay! Thank you to all the firefighters who have worked and those that are still working on these fires. To those that came from overseas to help and support our nation, thank you. Thank you to everyone who donated to the firefighters, the relief efforts, and the wildlife rescue and recovery teams. Your kindness and generosity is so appreciated. And to those that find it necessary to keep telling us not only that you donated, but how much.
Shut up!
Be classy and keep that shit to yourself. Okay? Thanks. And also, don't worry about the trees and the koalas. They're going to be fine. Thanks for watching this week's video. I'll see you next time.
Nah, you're an idiot, mate. You really are.
Because our town doesn't have a lot of money, but we have hearts of gold, Mr. Prime Minister.
There are downright apocalyptic images coming out of Australia right now as the country's battling hundreds of fires that have burned across the country for months now.
Make no mistake, the tragedy unfolding in Australia is climate change based.
Potentially millions of hectares of native habitat being permanently lost. If a tree is turned to ash, it doesn't grow back.
Let me be clear to the Australian people. Our emissions reductions policies will both protect our environment and seek to reduce the risks and hazards that we're seeing today.
As to who is correct, the answer is nobody.
I stayed before, yeah, but I'd say to anybody, don't stay, just go. Don't stay, just go, just get out and go.
The focus, as I said at the outset, is to fight these fires and to get people to safety. Thank you very much.